All right, so you're welcome back to the show. This is the AM show. My name is Gifty and up here I'm here with Roland Walker. I'm sitting in for my baby girl, Mama V Owusu Abuaje, who's, taking a little break. So Roland, what have you been doing on the break?
We've been trying to see whether we get all our guests aggregated on the Zoom platform, and we've been able to do that.
Okay, so we're ready for our conversation. I'm asking you the big question, which is, will you go out to register for a new voter ID or when, I should say, the Electoral Commission opens up for you to come do that? Send us a WhatsApp on 0540109009. Roland, how do we start this conversation?
Well, it's a conversation. If we want to start, then we have to start introducing our guests. And it's a conversation on how we have to live the new normal and how that can influence Ghana's electoral process, because there are a number of things that have already begun. The Electoral Commission now says that, look, it's putting a tender inviting various service providers to provide sanitizers, PPEs, etc. They've also invited the parties Gifty just this Wednesday to have a meeting, and that is the Inter-Party Advisory Committee, IPAC. But it leads to one thing, Gifty. And so that's why we're introducing our guest. Dr. Emmanuel Akwete is Executive Director, IDEC. That's the Institute of Democratic Governance. And we'll show all of them on screen for you. And then also we have Franklin Kujo. Franklin Kujo is President, Imani Africa. And Franklin, can you hear me? Good morning.
Yes, I can hear you, Roland, and good morning, Gifty.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, we'd also have Dr. Kojo Asante join us. He's Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement, CDD. Doc, thank you for joining us. Good morning to you as well.
Good morning, and good morning to colleagues.
All right. And last but not the least is Dr. Amache Boateng, Political Scientist, KNUST. Doc, you're welcome. Thank you.
A pleasure.
Well, great. Gifty, ladies first. We've been talking gender parity and what women can do better than men. Please start.
Oh, of course, women do things with exceptional results, and I'm sure that our panel members also agree with me. Dr. Akwete is joining us. He's having to, reposition the camera. Doc, it's good to have you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay.
I couldn't take it on my computer, so I'm using the phone.
That's okay. That's okay. So as you position,
okay, yeah.
I like to have this conversation by understanding how, getting personal with people. I like to understand how this, COVID has shaped life for people. I'll just add that to my very first question of how, for you, the processes will change. So far, by the way, what are your thoughts on how we are preparing towards election? There is a big political game going on. You hear the NPP speak, you hear the NDC speak, and it boils down to a new voters register that one side says they don't want, the other side says they want. Before we go into that conversation, what are your thoughts of how we are managing this or how we are handling this so far? And like I'm saying, you can add to this answer how coronavirus, has changed your personal life. Maybe I should start with Franklin Kujo. Franklin?
Oh, good morning, my good friends. I'm seeing them once again. Dr. Machi as well, Kojo and Dr. Akwete. Good to see you. Well, first of all, on the personal level, I think it's disrupted many things. I put up a post 2 days ago, testing that, in our line of business, sometimes you make some small coins when you do some travel and have some speaking engagements and all sorts. I think I've lined up about 5 or 6 of them internationally that were not just knowledge sharing platforms, but there were also opportunities to make some small money. And at that level, even though it's minuscule, it definitely impacted everything. The thought of not being able to move around in itself was quite limiting. And now our lives have changed. Professionally, I think our businesses have been impacted. We now work mostly from home, or otherwise we'd have to take things and shift. It also means that some of your donors who may be business inclined have had their bottom lines definitely shifted. So what it means is that you are seeing depressing opportunities that go along. So that I can say.
Okay.
But on the home front, it's been increased lockdown because there are kids involved, and that means they've been in prison, for lack of a better word, for quite some time now. So that's just on a personal level, but it's good. What it means is that the adrenaline has gone up. You have to keep shouting, stop doing this and that. But it's also made it opportune for us to connect. I mean, in our line of business, my colleagues will tell you that there's no time, we don't have 8 to 5 here. It's work around the clock. Right. Sometimes you are taking up. So that's just by way of introductions. Okay. If that is what you wanted to know.
Right. I wanted to maybe we can go around it so that when we come back and we're talking about the election, we just focus on the election. Dr. Akwete, do you want to share with us your own personal experience, coronavirus, and how it's disrupted life?
Thank you very much. I'll start by observing that in this COVID period, and as you can see on the screen, Franklin looks more handsome. And I've wondered whether it isn't good for him that he's not traveling around picking minuscule fans and so on. And
I can't imagine.
This is the most handsome picture I've ever seen. So Franklin, that's good. He's good for all of us. I think the interesting thing about COVID is that it confined us, but it also made us think through options. If the public space is not available, we never reckoned the importance of technological developments. And the fact we still can work as we've always done. And I think in that, it is beginning to shape us in thinking options and not just looking at things, in a linear way. In which other ways, what ways can we still get things going? I think to some extent, working from home, if you have all the gadgets, makes you probably more distractive. The physical meetings have reduced. You control your time better. Probably you save by not driving around recklessly, although you are getting little money now because even the funders are not funding, So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that, of course, there are health issues. And now you're paying attention to little things, hygiene, obeying simple rules, and not just taking great care of yourself. Because when we are very busy, the last thing we do is to think of our health or even our surroundings. You just focus on what you're going to do and going.
So now we're taking care of ourselves more.
Yes, more because you're home. I can tell by looking at Franklin that he's been eating much more than usual and so on. So let's from that aspect, it's good.
All right.
But I think where I feel we're failing is that we seem to be waiting for the regime of restrictions and the way it impacts our public spaces and our physical presence and so on.
All right.
To end. Okay.
Well, Dr. Akwete, I have to say that we want you to draw closer to your phone because this is not the laptop we're not getting, so that we can get a good sound, basically.
Yeah, in the meantime, I guess so.
So you want me to be holding my phone throughout? Okay.
Not necessarily. Just get closer to it. I mean, that's fine.
I mean, you can put something behind the phone. I do that sometimes. You can put something behind the phone to give it support.
Maybe a book or something of the sort. Just lean it.
Actually, I put it on a book, but it's like, okay, I have a book here.
Yes, this is coronavirus.
Is it better?
Yeah, better. If you can get closer, that's even better, but it's okay.
Okay. I'll load it. Don't let somebody else talk.
All right.
Yes, let's bring in the.
Okay, so straight away, first, let me ask you, Dr. Kojo Asante, as we get into the groove, what have been your own observations about what has gone on up to date in relation to how we've prepared, Electoral Commission on one side, the political parties on the other, towards 2020?
Well, thank you, and again, good morning to the viewers. I think before COVID hit in March, we already had a lot of issues with the electoral register, and there were a lot of efforts from both civil society and different actors to try to get some consensus around whether to compile a register or not to compile a register. We kind of did not resolve that problem before the COVID issue hit. And then in the midst of COVID, there were these concerns whether the process would still be undertaken by the EC, whether NIA was going to get involved, and so on and so forth. That led to a court case, and then that was suspended. So all things went quiet, and maybe that was probably where there was a little mistake, where we were all consumed by the whole COVID experience and the lockdown. We could not even get time to think about the time frame, for elections, and therefore the need to even engage during the lockdown period, so we can make some time up. So now we are in a position where we are back after the lockdown has been lifted. The EC is going ahead. People are still peeved by the decision. There doesn't seem to be any opportunity to engage and have some consensus around this. The NDC has taken the matter to court, not on the decision of whether to compile or not to compile, but to do with the constitutional instrument that's currently before Parliament. So maybe that might give us a sense that, well, we might be able to get some consensus around the compilation issue, but the actual process that is going to be unfolded, where identity cards become an issue, is where maybe we need to do some more work. So that's where we are, and time is running out because we are already in June, or we will be in June next week, and that really compresses the calendar even more tighter than we had, and very little room to delay any further. So that's our current situation, and as I said, time really is not on anybody's side. Decisions have to be made and made quickly.
Well, Dr. Matthew, one critical issue that has come under controversy is the subject of the register. And I know Mr. Franklin Kujo on the side has been a keen advocate because of related concerns on cost and priority of technology and its deployment, and how that can have an effect on efficiency. Said we should not have a new register. From where we are, the EC is now so much determined that this process will go on. What do you think should be the approach of the EC going forward?
Thank you very much. Let me say good morning to my colleagues, then to listeners.
Good morning.
Actually, when you go into elections as a political party, you want to be rest assured of the fact that the outcome cannot be predetermined, before the elections on the basis of the electoral register. And actually, the ability to achieve this is captured as one of the necessary things that should really guide the governance of elections. So if the EC, that really has been working with the electoral register, has an understanding that there's the need for a new voters register to be put in place, in the absence of which it cannot guarantee free and fair elections, then the EC is addressing a significant factor, because that is the basis. It is on the basis of this understanding, the EC producing an electoral register, that really does not determine the winner ahead of time. The ability to do that establishes the neutrality of the EC, and then it adds to the integrity of the whole electoral process. So if we argue on economic, we make an economic case, and on the basis of that suggest that we make do with the existing register, then this whole talk about democracy being expensive, I think is will have to be brought in, because it's not just expensive in terms of economic resources, but any other thing that can happen to disrupt the system. Ghana has made a lot of gains so far from 1993 to date, and one of the core issues has got to do with elections, and so far so good. But then we got to be prepared to really work with the EC, give them the benefit of the doubt when we have to, given the fact that they are in the helm of affairs and they have knowledge, intricate knowledge of the caliber of the current voters register. If they themselves doubt the integrity of the voters register, then that is it. Voter register is gone. And if we need to put in a new one, we need to put in a new one. At the end of the day, why should we go in for a president who is not a real representative of the people? Why should we go in for a member of parliament who is not a real representative of the people, but maybe due to one or two factors, a fraudulent voters register, simply working to or inuring to the benefit of one or another person? So I think society should also be interested in this. On the basis of that, definitely you want to support the EC to go in for a new register.
Well, Mr. Franklin Cudjoe will have a lot to say about this. Who really wants the register? Is it the parties, or it's the EC, or we have a divided front on the part of the parties, Mr. Franklin Cudjoe? And to what end, in your perspective, as Imani?
Well, first of all, as you know, on electoral related matters, and if like the issues around voting and voter education, my seniors, Dr. Kudjoe Asante, Dr. Akwete, in terms of organizational representation, are much more, they have much more experience in doing this type of work. But we got into the fray when we heard the EC suggest cost. And as active citizens, we thought that the conversations around cost were not true. In fact, the basis for those conversations were themselves quite untrue. The EC has never claimed anywhere that the voter register was until recently. And you see, you don't even get to hear them make coordinated statements. It's either one commissioner dropping hints in an interview, suggesting at one point that, well, the register cannot, there's just a minuscule, I think 0.54% of the voter roll who have to be manually verified. He didn't say that they will be disenfranchised, manually verified. And because of that, the register should be thrown away. The other point you keep hearing is that, well, we just need a new register because the so-called algorithms that characterize the keys to the old software are not there, and then somebody holds it. On the face of that, that's even a lie. To use a word, I like to use the word lie. This is a machine or a biometric voter system that has delivered, if my count serves me right, 4 elections since they were purchased in 2012. You see, biometric systems are not like the ordinary paper and thumbprint. The fact of the matter is that once your biometrics are captured, they are captured. Now, if the argument is being made that, well, the software is compromised, and because of that, somebody holds the key, you need to change that. We were suggesting to the EC that you haven't conducted an audit or audit of the assets that you have. The Auditor General hasn't done that yet. So on what basis are you telling us that systems that have delivered elections in 2012 with a voter error, with a margin of error of, I think, almost 33%, and in 2016 with an error of about 12%, and in 2018 or 2019 all the referendum as well as the district level elections retained error margins that were within allowable limits. In fact, the district level elections retained error margins of just, I think, 5%, which meant that the system was being perfected as we go along. The other point that ought to be made is that this perfection of the systems came about as a result of continuous investment by the same EC. If you read the appropriations document that are before Parliament, when the EC appeared before Parliament, they did say that, look, we want to purchase, we want to replace certain parts of the biometric voter system. And anytime they've done that, Parliament has actually approved. In fact, in 2018, they bought about 500 of these machines. And Parliament approved. The investment plans of the EC from 2015 to 2019 shows that we've invested $60 million in continuous improvement of the system. So it cannot be true that the so-called software keys were handled and given to somebody else, and so the elections will be compromised. It cannot just be true. So the point we're making on the issues of cost was, you cannot come and tell us that every part of the voter equipment that was used in just December, every part of it is kaput. It's like suggesting that a bank has about 180 ATM machines, and because there is the likelihood of some tampering with the software of the bank, they have to change the entire ATM machines. Those arguments we thought could not serve us well. That's how we got into the conversations about cost. And democracy is indeed expensive. But you see, democracy also talks about making sure that for money analysis. So for us, that's the matter. I think this argument in Ghana where we say that, well, we know the cost of everything, but the value of nothing, it's actually a perfect ruse for our political actors to act in very, in a manner that wastes a lot of resources.
But Mr. Kudjev, the point is that the EC is going ahead anyway. So it looks as if we moved on from that level of conversation, don't you think?
Actually, you have a point. I mean, the ship has sailed. And I think for now, as I said not too long ago on another system network, I certainly do not have confidence in the system so far. Because I think the processes, you see, the elections are not an event. It's a process. And if the process is leading up to it, because even in the purchase of the equipment itself, we saw that the evaluation processes were not done properly. So I'm not comfortable that the person, so that's what
so you're not comfortable. Your level of confidence in the processes is pretty low, is what the point you're making.
Exceedingly low, because the EC has superintended a number of shifty lies, and that's exactly what has happened.
Okay, let me bring Dr. Kwete in here. Doc, one of the key issues outstanding at the moment is a CI that's been laid in Parliament. Now, the opposition has raised concerns about that CI. They say that it makes absolutely no sense for you to rule out some of the documents, that people require to be able to register. For example, the current voter ID is out of it. And the concern by the minority, they've really highlighted it clearly. Where do you stand on that dynamic, the dynamic of this CI and what it would do to people's ability to register, which has been a bone of contention at the moment?
Well, before I go to the bone of contention, I just comment on what is going on. And especially with Chrissy's point that, okay, the EC makes decisions and determines what the fitness of a register for an election. It's an ideal situation. Unfortunately, in our political history, especially in the Fourth Republic, confidence in the register affects confidence in the results.
Yeah.
So when people start challenging results, the credibility of results, it comes with, I'm looking at your screen, and I don't know if it's my positioning, but
yes, it is your positioning.
Yes.
If you would just be stable, I think you were doing pretty well previously. So if we can go back to how it was earlier, you're good.
Okay. Okay. Like when I was here.
Yes, please. All right. I believe you are well positioned now.
Is it better?
Yes, please. It's better. Please go ahead.
Okay. So we should know the history around our elections and registers and the allegations and the suspicions and the perceptions. So we've had a particular, affinity with or relationship with the register, its veracity, its reliability, its genuineness, who got in, who didn't get in. Every election has to sort out register issues. And therefore, that history should even guide those. Biometric register came about out of those same considerations. Ghost names, people who have registered 4 or 5 times, and therefore multiple voting incidents, which therefore question whether it is truly one man or one woman, one vote, what happens in party strongholds. These conversations and perceptions themselves also affect the confidence we have in the EC.
Yeah.
Because in the past, it's like, the EC would condone this, would be political and so on. But what we want is a very strong, independent EC that also takes into account all these history and the factors that shape confidence in its work and its delivery. And therefore, we cannot treat it lightly. For me, what the matter is now is that I do not want to discuss this in the context of pre-COVID-19. I want to discuss it in the context of COVID-19, which is with us now. And because of the health hazards in public spaces and large numbers coming together, social distancing, physical distancing, stay at home and so on, doesn't want us to get into harm's way. So the football stadium are closed. Every place, churches we don't go, every place where people gather, universities are schools, and so on, everywhere. So the public spaces are potentially harmful spaces for attack by the virus. And we've been moved out of that. So when we are now considering register, we are considering ID cards and so on, it should all be in context that at the end of the day, where does it take us? Okay, and how do we ensure that between now and December, roughly six months to go, with coronavirus, novel coronavirus, full in display, numbers increasing and so on, what are we doing? Are we doing the elections before COVID-19, or are we doing one that is saying we are living with COVID-19 and we must adjust appropriately? In that case, it seems to me that the issue of compiling a brand new register for all, okay, as against your options, do you have another register that you can use in the context of the health hazards and the dangers we are facing, especially bringing in a large crowd, because no activity apart from football brings maybe the charismatic churches and what they pull, brings millions of people outside over a period of time in the processes involved, registration, validation, voting day, and so on, vote counting and so on, and the passion and intensity around it. Sometimes the EC is stretched. It's very difficult to control that passion and the crowd that comes. But in COVID context, we're told that this is dangerous. It could lead to mass infection and the price will be too high. We've seen it in other places. So on that score, for me, what is important is for us to look at what our options are to operate in a COVID environment. And elections are important. You know that there had been an earlier conversation where immediately the president introduced the restrictions and the lockdowns and so on. We moved into the likelihood that elections will not take place.
I mean, that's a conversation, that's an idea that we've flirted with quite a bit. But I think the point that you're making, Doc, if I get you right, is... okay, I just want to be sure that I'm following you. And the point is that it doesn't look safe for us to go ahead with the election or with the processes leading to the election. Is this the point you're making, sir?
I think I'm trying to discuss this in terms of options. It doesn't look safe if we insist that we should go ahead with a general registration, a new management system, and everybody should come out. We should come out in our numbers, millions, to vote. That is one option. You see, in the COVID context, it's one option. The other option is what enables us to minimize risks to the citizens, to the majority of the people, because the health risks are real. And that's why the president says, well, we can fix the economy, but we can't bring people back when they are dead. And so that option has to be explored. And it is in that context that you see whether the issues of our voter ID cards, which ones should we use and which ones shouldn't we use, makes sense.
Okay.
I think if you decide to go with the existing register, you probably would find a situation with identification certified by, for instance, the Supreme Court, what it dealt with in 2016. If you want to deal with the new register, where we actually want to make sure that the ghosts of the past, the multiplicity of ID cards, the different people who shouldn't register, who get into it, and so on, we are making that difficult, impossible. In which case, then, the kind of ID cards you use, Ghana cards, becomes important. Unfortunately, we have not been able to issue Ghana cards to everybody. So the moment you introduce passports and you ask for two other registered voters, you are bringing the kind of, range of ID cards that creates the problem even for the existing register.
So what's your point?
Okay, you do not have. So the point then is that we would be able to settle this ID card issue. My point is that there's a serious risk we are facing in bringing a large number of people out, re-register, general registration, which is where the conflict is between the parties and the EC. And I think that even if the EC decides to go on, it shouldn't stop us from drawing attention to the fact that there is an option, a safer option.
All right,
that we must face.
Dr. Akwete, just in one sentence, the current system and the options that have been provided by the Electoral Commission, would you say we should use or also complement it with the additional usage of the old voters register or the existing voters ID card, in addition to the passport and the National Identification Authority cards? Just in a sentence.
You see, when you've assumed that we are using the new, we're going to use the new, what do you call it? The new register that's going to be compiled. Okay, and that brings an issue that probably the Supreme Court has to determine because there's a case before it.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that we can make a choice that resolves the card issues for us. For example, in compiling, are we going to do limited registration of voters with the new management system the EC had? If we reach a consensus that it should not be general registration but limited registration, could we then say that all 18-year-olds and those eligible but didn't register must have the Ghana card, everybody who falls that range, because it's a limited number, about 1 million plus, as compared to 14 or 15. Could we then have a measure that says anyone who is now eligible to vote must have the Ghana card, and that's the standard card. And therefore, NIA must make sure that it operates so all 18-year-olds and eligibles must get that card.
Okay.
It solves the problem. It's limited. As soon as you're going into a general registration, then you are opening all these kind of worms, which cannot be resolved easily, and therefore the Supreme Court has come in.
Okay, and already the Supreme Court is sitting on one of the cases. So I bring the CDD, Dr. Asante in here. Based on what Dr. Akwete has said, what are your own thoughts, your own assessments? Should we go for, a limited registration be more appropriate in COVID-19 or in an election with the background of COVID-19?
Yeah, okay. Let me make a couple of points. So I think for me, I've been intimately involved with elections since 2004 elections. Right at the center of it. And one thing I know for a fact is that all the outcomes that we have achieved can only be done with stakeholder engagement, consultation, and consensus building. That's been a fact. It doesn't matter what the challenges are. People have to talk and agree agree to work together to make the elections credible. That's one point. I think what Dr. Akwete's point is on the options of whether you do a compilation of a new register or a limited voter registration is the choice between bringing out 17 million people and 1.5 or 1 million to 1.5 million people. Obviously, 1.5 million at the upper limit is more manageable than 17 million, and you are able to manage all the risk associated with that. So that's really the crux of the matter. The issue around the identity card issue, for me, is probably the most troubling. Yeah. So even if we go ahead with compiling a new register, the idea that we are going to rely largely on people vouching, 2 registered voters vouching for up to 10 people at a time at registration centers is going to just lead to a chaotic situation. And remember that at these registration centers, you are trying to keep social distancing, you're trying to avoid infections and so on and so forth. And you have a situation where people would end up challenging the citizenship or the eligibility of people, and that would be the majority. This often was an exception to the rule. So it is really mind-boggling why the EC decided to not add the voter register, because it was the same EC that actually suggested that they were going to make the process faster by retaining the biographical information that is already in the system, so that when you get there with your ID card, it easily populates that, and then you just have to verify whether your details still remain the same or have changed. And that was going to cut down the process by quite a lot of time. So it's quite strange that the EC has removed this. So what do we do? Currently, the CI will be maturing soon. I don't know how many days it has stayed in Parliament.
I think last week it was 10 days.
Of parliamentarians annul the CI becomes law. And this is where the challenge is. If it becomes law, then we have to rely, as I said, on people vouching for people on that during the registration period. And really, that's chaos. So for me, if you are looking at that scenario, then there has to be a lot of talking as to how that is going to be managed. Otherwise, I just foresee a real problem on the ground during the registration period.
Franklin, what's your own option? Should we ideally be seen to be adding the existing voter ID cards that voters hold?
Well, as Dr. Akwete and Dr. Santi have said to you, to listeners, I mean, it's being prudent in the midst of confusion. I would think that the safer option, really, is to fast-track the process by allowing the existing voter ID cards as well. Don't forget, the last EC was equally challenged, and some ineligible voters were taken out. I think to the extent that because the biometric system was such unique, we were able to find out that about 150,000 of ineligibles were taken out quite quickly. So what we have currently is quite clean. I mean, to suggest that because it's unclean, we need to expunge even those that were already registered with ID cards, it's unfortunate. And you see, this is again the moving confusion that the EC creates. In one breath, they suggest that they go to Parliament and say, oh yes, we'll use the existing voter IDs because we think it will fast track the process. Then somebody dreamt up the nice procurement idea that let's throw everything away and purchase a new system. And because of that, they are now backtracking on the fact that they have to use the existing ID, because presumably the existing ID is in sync with the biometric system we have currently. So the only justification, which doesn't make sense, by the way, is to throw away everything you said, including telling Parliament and the people of Ghana that, oh, existing voter IDs will be useful because to fast track the process. Look, as Dr. Kwete and Dr. Kojo have said to us, a limited registration is a much more useful idea. Of course, the counter argument would be that, okay, well, even if we did a limited registration of 1.5 million persons, including using the existing voter IDs, what happens if the pandemic, the coronavirus is still with us in December? Well, the fact of the matter is that we don't know whether corona will still be damaging. It will be that damaging up until November. Maybe we are still living or will be living with it at that point. But it is prudent that because of the very nature of the electoral process, where, as you've heard, Dr. Kwete and co have suggested, that there are too many, the tension alone is not useful. But of course, the health aspects also have to be considered. So I certainly think, you asked a simple question, but I wanted to go around and tell you that the EC, its own submissions to Parliament makes it really, 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 really incredulous. It just beats my imagination. And I'm wondering what it is that motivates this kinds of shifty behavior.
So
there's so many things to Parliament that they have backtracked on. And I hope that even though the CI would be, of course, I mean, Parliament, we know it's going to be majority that virtually decide.
So then, I just want to find out what will be your option from the options that Dr. Kwete puts on the table. Well, for you, it would be much safer if we did a limited registration, like he says, or if we go with a general registration.
Is that me?
Yes, it's you, Franklin, because I'm wrapping up with you on that.
Yeah, but of course, even before COVID came, you see, let's not make this excuse of the EC. Even before COVID came, everything we are saying still holds. COVID has just come to compound it, so it makes sense that you do a limited registration. I don't know. I mean, if I were a private entity, and that's the way I run, but because it's the public and everybody lives at the expense of the public, especially our actors, then it makes it easy for those kinds of conversations to be had. I think it's even a non-starter for us to be discussing something that's as prudent as this. It's just commonsensical. That's what you should do.
Okay.
I don't know what is hitting anybody.
I just want to bring in, you have a question for Franklin?
No, I wanted to ask Dr. Amache a question.
Exactly. And I just a follow-up to Dr. Amache about the point that Dr. Asante makes, that to minimize the chaos, the sort of chaos that we are likely to witness if we go ahead with using people to vouch for people who want to register, requires a lot of interaction, conversations among the key stakeholders. And that's why I wanted to bring you in. How, from your perspective, do we do that?
Thank you very much.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is the main challenge that actually confronts the EC and, for that matter, all of us. The CI and the use of those documents as the primary document to establish the identity of people, in the absence of which you can get two people to come and determine that you are who you are. The challenges with them have been, discussed, actually. Everybody hasn't got a passport. The national identification card is not complete yet. Everybody hasn't got it. And then we're saying that you can bring in two people. One thing that has brought us to this particular place is the inability of the EC over the years to give us a credible voters register on 3 occasions. If we were to go ahead to replace the current one, then definitely that would be the 4th time we'll be coming out with a completely new voters register. On the basis of that, I personally have an issue allowing the same EC that, to me, has demonstrated such ineptitude in compiling voters register to, proceed with it. And I've always suggested that if we really mean business. A completely new body should be asked to take charge of this issue, because I don't foresee, Ghana going back to talk about the need to replace the voters register in the years to come. So if currently, given the context we find ourselves in, made much more complex by COVID-19, going to be in a position to produce the voters register that I foresee. It should be one that should capture every Ghanaian. Once a child is born, a permanent number is generated and given to the person, something that you can't alter. Even the conversation should not necessarily revolve around ID cards or whatever. A permanent number generated like it is done in other areas. And so Ghana has a national database, out of which the EC from time to time will have to draw on and simply produce its voters register. And this national database should be, these days of internet, it should be accessible to almost every Ghanaian. You can go online and check, on your details. So in the light of assuming we were to believe what the EC is saying, especially now that they have even taken out the voters register, the existing voter ID as one of the documents that could be used, then the EC is throwing away the old voters register completely. The EC is throwing everything away. And if we are to take that argument by the EC, then to me, the understanding is that then the EC simply should not be made to come up with a new voters register that we anticipate. After all, the EC doesn't work for itself. It works for the good people of Ghana. And so personally, yes, I believe in the voters register that has integrity. Like Dr. Akwete said, historical challenges we've had with our electoral outcomes, have been based on the nature, the credibility, the integrity of the voters register. So this is my understanding of the issue.
Okay, so I'll pose this question first to Dr. Kojo Asante. It looks like the Electoral Commission has not gotten it right from the start. Usually what it does, consensus building among the stakeholders, the parties particularly. Why have we seen such a situation this time around?
Limited. I really think there's really an urgency for us to find a way to bring all the parties, to the table, because seriously, we don't have time. And a lot of, it's not even just the political party representatives that we should worry about. I mean, the citizens who are going to go out there need to have a very clear understanding of what kind of protocols they're supposed to follow when they are at the registration center. The issues that they might not understand, say for around these vouching system, who is eligible to vouch and who's not eligible to vouch, how is that process going to be? The kind of education you need to prepare people mentally so that they can be disciplined when they are at the registration center I mean, we don't have even the time to do that. So I think, IPAC is meeting on Wednesday, but IPAC, as we know, is very divided. And so trying to reach consensus there is always a challenge. But it is something that, the parties must all bring their minds to it, because if they do not engage constructively around these processes, everybody loses. The EC loses, we lose, citizens, the parties also lose. So I am hoping that the IPAC meeting, more sort of sound minds would prevail so that we can begin to find a solution, to the problem that we didn't need to create, but we have created. Because the timetable, the window is closing. We need to get through these processes if we're going to have an election by December 7th, and if we are to avoid a constitutional crisis at the end of the year. So I think that all of the focus should be around the talking and the engaging, so that we can try to move forward even if the decision to move forward is unpleasant, we all have to compromise to get this done. And so I think those options have to be on the table. How we're going to manage this voucher system have to be on the table. And there has to be a lot of public education, very intense public education ahead of this. Remember that the public will still have to make a choice whether or not they're going to come out to register to vote. Because already, even prior to COVID, there was a real sense of a fatigue with registration, with the democratic process. A lot of people say they will not go and even register to vote. So if you add COVID to it, people are going to make health choices, whether or not they will go and expose themselves or not. So there are a lot of issues that conversations that have to have with the public, let alone key stakeholders, and we don't have the time. As I said, it's end of May, and if the EC is going to start in June, as it's been, we have basically about 2 weeks to get our act together. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really difficult for all of us. And as Dr. Akwete and Franklin has said, if the processes leading up to the elections are, compromised, then you are going to have a bad electoral outcome. And therefore, I think the pressure is on all of us to act sooner.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions. And before we go to Dr. Akwete, we Africans have a problem. I don't see the need of compiling a new voters register in this COVID era. The money could have been used to support the economy. Kweku from La Paz. I also do have this one from Osei Boateng in Kumasi, and he says that if you look at the situation where the Electoral Commission on one hand says it is going to compile a register and the opposition party is not in agreement, but the party in power is in agreement, it provides a stalemate that would need somebody to be able to mediate. I have this one from Ibrahim Abubakar, and Tamale is where he's texting from. We need to ensure that the Electoral Commission listens to reason. Why would I go and register when I know coronavirus is in the air? I think somebody needs to talk to the Electoral Commission. And that's where the question I have to pose to you comes in. Dr. Akwete, what will draw an ordinary voter who has seen a lot of communication ongoing about increasing cases of coronavirus, the need to maintain social distancing and related matters, to go and queue and say, I want to register? How do we get that done?
What would draw that voter would be how it sees the parties and the EC working together, because the assurance will come from them. Like it or not, the electorate is split between the two parties. And therefore, and the parties do education a lot. In fact, voter education and the message they have and what they should do come essentially from the parties. The parties are formidably organized and networked on the ground. And the moment they see that the EC, the MPP, the NDC have agreed on a number of things, it facilitates the education Kojo has referred to. There's common purpose, which then says they would assure them that we are doing everything for your safety. And so come. Because there would be ideas, as soon as the EC opens that door, that it is pursuing collaboration, cooperation and collaboration more than asserting its independence. It is going to see that it needs or going to realize or reap, the benefits of these two parties and all the parties involved, including civil society, now making suggestions for it to lead in organizing an election that would also bring the public up. Where they are seeing conflict and misunderstanding, they are not going to, they are going to toe their party line. Like it or not, members of the parties do not easily defy their leaders and the direction in which they are looking. They go that way. Mm-hmm. So if they are going to educate them and they say, okay, yesterday there was this news trending that, NDC has asked for written to EC for some materials to educate on the new and so on, and so they're coming back. Please, don't be assured. Unless you get that consensus built and agreement, we are on a common page, there would be some dissension. Between the two parties, they are fighting and they counter each other much more than move in the same direction. But the general public needs leaders, party leaders, EC, and anybody else to be speaking the same language, assuring them of their safety, health first. And then they would come on the basis of that. But where they see conflict and their leaders are telling them different things and so on, you might end up with probably lower numbers than we want. It might continue even on election day. One party would say, well, I still got the numbers, but it has created huge legitimacy problems. You know, so we are not in a good situation. And I think, as Kojo said, it is urgent that the parties are brought around the table. The EC, whether it's the EC or it's Parliament, the EC reports to Parliament. There's a majority leader and a minority leader, and they have a way of working sometimes more effectively than the parties outside. But we need this talk quickly to resolve these disagreements, because from where I sit, we think the EC can do a number of things to diffuse the situation and convince the Ghanaian public that there is peace and their leaders will care for them. Many would take a cue from the president, who said that, look, we can't bring human lives lost back, but we can fix the economy. So we must do everything to preserve life. That is the standard question everybody would ask. Is the decision to go with the new register and where we are and all that, does it meet the standard? If not, let them meet and agree. I also think the EC has a right to make a decision that will make it operationally effective. So that if they come to the idea that they want to use have a new biometric voters management system with all the technology and so on, I think generally it would have worked in a situation where everybody has a standard card and we know our census and the kind of problem, birth and death, as Dr. Kwesi Amachibwate said. He said, look, at birth you're registered, you don't even need registration, your number is there, it's unique, and so on. Apparently, government has put in motion all these processes, but they haven't matured. They haven't come to an end. And probably it could be that next year. But you have to test the new management system. It is very unusual to import a new system and apply it en masse at once. You have to test it and see what challenges. And you know, our people are not all literate at the level of the EC. Some would understand, some wouldn't understand, some need to be guided. If we are not careful, on the day that the registration starts with the conflict between the parties and so on, there is no unity of purpose. EC's work will be extremely difficult in different areas.
And I guess this is where
we are certain.
I was just going to say that I guess this is where civil society comes in to play, you know, that third-party role. Because if the NPP and the NDC are battling it out, the NDC seem to believe that the NPP is on the part of the Electoral Commission, and we have all these issues unresolved. We have about 6 months to the election. We don't really have time. Let's take final words from all of you, and as we focus on the way forward, having realized all these problems, all these issues that are coming up, how do we move on from here, 6 months to an election in coronavirus? We should start perhaps with Franklin. Franklin, please go ahead.
Well, the EC's own eminent group of advisors, which it has discarded with contempt, must be brought back to the table. It looks to me this is the time for negotiations. And negotiations can be done. Within 90 minutes, those things could be settled. So it's just talk. That's all that ought to be done. I mean, a lot of the moving parts have actually sailed away. But I think we need to listen to reason, especially in the light of COVID. But much more is the frightening scenario that Dr. Kwesi paints at the end of his submission just about now. That this machine itself, don't forget, if it's a new one they are going to use, ought to be properly tested. Because if you recall in 2012, when we did that, that's why we had about almost 30% error rate. Because once it's new, It will have all these challenges. So in addition to all of this, it calls for some cooler heads around the table. I hope the EC is able to resolve all of this before the elections.
All right. So, Franklin, thank you very much for those final words. Let's move on to Dr. Akwete. Doc, the way forward, having realized all these problems.
The way forward, I think, is for the EC to pursue collaboration, which calls for dialogue. Could it deal with at the IPAC level? I am not sure, because IPAC has consistently been dysfunctional since 2012. The EC tries to bring them together on a various agenda. They just keep on splitting and walking out, and that has also made it difficult for the EC. In this case, I think that because we have a risk that could of a constitutional crisis if things don't go well, we can pursue everything, but we are going to see the problems in action, in operation. It is not a matter just for EC. I think that that's why I said I believe that EC reports to Parliament, is accountable to Parliament, through Parliament to us. They are representatives. Majority leader, minority leader probably could open the way, but the EC must not see that as its independence being broached, or breached. But I think it is an important moment where the EC ought to be heard. I, for instance, think it can, with limited registration, it can put the new management system to test. But there is no time, so resolve the conflict and let's all move with the existing register, for instance, and upgrade it. For example, all the parties, MPP leaders, including their campaign manager now, general secretary, organized. I've heard them say that if we can't do the registration, a new compilation of a general compilation, they don't mind using the existing register, and whether the new or the existing are used, they would win the elections. Now, of course, the existing register doesn't mean you shouldn't update it and validate it, you see. But so there are those openings. NDC says it could work with the new system if they are not listening, but they know what to do. And that qualification, you know what is that what to do?
Okay.
I think we should get them on the same page to mobilize us to go and vote in the interest of the country. And I think the decision the president takes, whether it's lifting the restrictions and so on, is also crucial. That will signal. I think that so far the president has put health and the interest of the entire nation first. If it removes the restriction just because registration should go on, it's going to make the resolution of the conflict between the EC and the parties difficult. And it is also going to open us to hazard, and I think it would be unfair to the president. We need to first resolve this issue quickly. We have leaders who can be brought together to do that. And that's where civil society could come in and offer the support, whether it's the ideas or the options and so on. So we must make haste.
Thank you, Dr. Akwete. There, let me bring in Dr. Kojo Asante as well. Dr. Kojo Asante, your final words, the way forward.
Yeah, as I've said, all the experiences I've had with elections and, Ghana's reputation as in democratic election, having successful elections, has come about because stakeholders are prepared to disagree and come on to the table to discuss, their areas of disagreement, so that we can find solutions. So that has always been the model that we have used to have peaceful elections. And I think that there's no other way but to return to that strategy. I don't think anybody has a problem with the EC's independence. We all acknowledge and respect it, but I think we need to also be pragmatic and acknowledge that there are challenges that can only be confronted by the stakeholders, playing their roles. The parties are important in the public education. They need to be brought on board so that they could be, supporters of the process and not detractors. So for me, that's, the window, as I said, the window is for me about 2 weeks. And we need to really act fast to prepare ourselves, to avoid, any problems during the elections. One of the things I really worry about is the security services who have to be brought in the middle of this, because remember, we're doing this within COVID. Yeah. So, if you're going to separate two people fighting or making skirmishes and stuff exposes you to infection.
Yeah.
You know, with all the PPEs you might have and all of that, you might not be able to avoid it. So there are real challenges, and I think if we are not talking and get the protocols right, we really create a risky environment for everybody involved.
Dr. Asante, thank you very much for that submission as well. And we end with Dr. Amache Boateng, our political scientist. Doc, your own perspective going forward, final words.
What Kojo has been, calling for, consensus, definitely the way forward. Unfortunately, our political culture is not consensual. It is conflictual. I mean, we know that from the days, even before independence to date. So we are not going to be able to come to any consensus. At best, we might get some compromises. That's seen so far in the Fourth Republic. Like he also rightly said, the political parties have disagreed and agreed, and eventually Ghana has moved on. This is what I'm expecting. No matter what, let's float this idea to the political parties in opposition, the possibility of postponing the elections in November to allow the current government to be in office for a period to fight the COVID. Let's raise this issue and hear what they will say. So definitely the elections are going to take place. Nobody is going to countenance any such thought. Given that, we must do what must be done. We can't compromise on anything. What should be done to generate a voter register that has integrity? What should be done? That should be done. And I think the political parties, eventually, they get the right platform. And I don't know, the IPAC, let's keep our hopes alive and, believe that IPAC will be able to produce the atmosphere that will engender, such a discourse. Come to appreciate the fact that people, have the right to disagree with the EC. And then at the same time, they will also appreciate the fact that the EC too has a role to play and its independence cannot be compromised. At the end of the day, if we are looking at moving Ghana forward, if we don't have any plans to disrupt the country, in spite of whatever position we take, we will never come to a position where we will consciously, encourage our supporters to misbehave. It should be possible for Ghana to move on. And I think we'll get that at the end of the day.
Okay, and that'll be it for the discussion. I have about two messages. This one is coming from Latif Mohammed, texting us for Bunkrugu. He says that it is a good discussion, and we have to say that this is the time that the Electoral Commission needs to listen to the experts. Sadiq from Medina says, how can the EC get the support it deserves when they begin by bullying everyone and showing off their independence? This EC will find it difficult to build consensus and get their credibility on the line. They already have muddied the waters. Thank you, Sadiq from Medina. But please make sure you get interactive. We all have relevant social media platforms right here for the show. Now, we've had some great interactions. Dr. Amache Boateng is a political scientist, senior political science lecturer, KNUST. Franklin Kujo is also president, Imani Africa. Dr. Emmanuel Akwete is executive director, the Institute for Democratic Governance. And then Dr. Kujo Asante is with CDD Ghana, Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement. But it's been a great conversation, all of you.
Certainly has.
We wish you a great morning, and I know that the discussion will continue, Gifty.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, too.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. But we should also know that we will lead at the beginning of the next hour to that live press conference. It is the first of usually bi-weekly interactions that the COVID team, that's the national COVID team, has with its stakeholders, including the media and briefing Ghanaians. And right now we have to take a break. When we come back, we'll bring you the latest showbiz news. But we have this interaction, Kenny Japong with Mama Vio Swabwaji, that will replay for you.